July 8th, 2014. We all tuned in expecting a football match, right? But instead, the entire world witnessed a national tragedy. In this explainer, we're stepping right onto the pitch of the Mindanao Stadium in Belo Horizonte to examine what is perhaps the most shocking event in the history of sports. A match that literally defied logic, shattered expectations, and transformed a football scoreline into a permanent, undeniable piece of history.
I mean, it was a scoreline so unbelievable that people around the world genuinely checked their televisions just to make sure it wasn't a glitch. Imagine being there. Imagine watching the impossible unfold live right before your eyes. In a matter of minutes, the proudest footballing nation on earth was systematically dismantled on their own home soil. To understand how 90 minutes could completely shatter a nation's soul, well, we have to look way beyond the statistics.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Part 1, the ghost of 1950 and Brazil's emotional burden.
You've got to understand, in Brazil, football isn't just a sport, it is woven into the very fabric of their national identity. They've won 5 World Cups. That's more than anyone else. But the Maracanazo of 1950, that still echoed. Brazil had hosted the World Cup back then, needing only a draw against Uruguay to win, but they lost 2-1. Witnesses described these haunting scenes of silence, tears, and absolute disbelief. For 64 years, that loss was considered the absolute greatest tragedy in their sporting history. So, the 2014 World Cup, that was their destined moment for redemption. This team wasn't just playing for a shiny trophy. They were carrying the crushing emotional burden of healing a 64-year-old national wound. And yet, this incredibly passionate Brazilian side was actually extremely vulnerable right when they needed their strength the most. They had survived immense pressure to reach the semifinals, but then disaster strikes. They lose their most crucial attacker, Neymar, to a devastating back injury, and they lose their absolute rock in defense, Captain Thiago Silva, to a suspension. So they were stepping into the biggest match of their lives severely depleted, relying almost entirely on raw emotion and the desperate hope of a home crowd. Which brings us to our opposing force. Part 2, Germany's Quiet Revolution, the Strategic Blueprint.
Cut to Germany at the turn of the century. Their football was actually in crisis, seriously struggling at major tournaments. But they didn't rely on passion to fix it. They relied on hard infrastructure. German authorities launched one of the most ambitious reform programs in history. They systematically established new youth academies. They mandated heavy professional club investment, modernized all their coaching, and implemented long-term tactical training from a very early age. They weren't just practicing, they were systematically engineering a footballing machine.
And what was the result of that master plan? Well, a terrifyingly cohesive new generation of players. Lahm, Schweinsteiger, Müller, Hummels, Kroos, Neuer. Unlike past teams, these guys had grown up together within a highly organized, meticulous system. By 2014, they had reached semifinals and finals consistently. So they arrived in Brazil with this quiet, almost chilling confidence. Sure, they respected the host nation, but they absolutely did not fear them. They had a blueprint, and they were ready to execute it with absolute precision.
All right, so here we go. Part 3, the semifinal collision, emotion versus execution.
The stage is perfectly set. July 8th, 2014. Millions of fans are singing, flags are waving, the atmosphere is just electric inside the Mineirão Stadium. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate clash of philosophies. On one side, Brazil, deeply burdened by history, desperate for redemption, and fueled entirely by raw, unfiltered passion. And on the other side, Germany, the direct product of a 14-year strategic plan, utterly devoid of sentiment and ready to deploy cold, ruthless execution. It was the perfect storm.
The match kicks off. The first 10 minutes are tense, but, relatively normal. Then, the 11th minute arrives. Thomas Müller finds space inside the penalty area and calmly slots the ball into the net. 1-0, Germany. Now, it was a setback for Brazil, for sure. But hey, it's football. Teams go a goal down all the time. Absolutely nobody in that stadium, or watching around the world, could have possibly predicted the impending nightmare that was about to unfold.
So pay close attention here, because we're entering the Twilight Zone. Part 4, 6 minutes of silence. The collapse.
The 23rd minute hits. Miroslav Klose's scores on a rebound. Brazil 0, Germany 2. And with that, Klose breaks the all-time World Cup scoring record. The crowd actually gasps. The Brazilian players are looking nervously at one another. The entire stadium just falls into this stunned, heavy silence.
But before they can even process what just happened, Germany attacks again. Just 1 minute later, it's the 24th minute. Toni Kroos strikes. Brazil 0, Germany 3. The Brazilian defense completely loses all shape. Communication totally breaks down. Pure, unadulterated panic begins to spread through the yellow shirts on the pitch.
Literally seconds later, the kickoff happens, Brazil loses the ball instantly, and Toni Kroos scores again. Brazil 0, Germany 4. I mean, the crowd is just reeling. The players are entirely overwhelmed. Germany is moving like a machine, slicing right through a defense that has practically ceased to exist.
And then, the 29th minute, Sami Khedira makes it 5. Brazil 0, Germany 5. So the crucial point is, that is 4 goals scored in just 6 minutes. It defied every single law of the game. World-class commentators were literally just repeating the scoreline in disbelief because it felt like an impossibility happening in real time.
Part 5. A nation in shock. The emotional aftermath. As the players walked toward the tunnel at halftime, the camera panned to the stands, and it revealed a true human tragedy unfolding in the heart of Belo Horizonte. In the stands, children cried. Grown adults sat completely motionless. Some spectators even laughed nervously, just entirely unable to comprehend the situation. This wasn't just fans watching their team lose a game. This was a collective, televised funeral. Across Brazil, public viewing squares emptied out. Restaurants went dead silent. A nation globally renowned for its vibrant joy was suddenly paralyzed by a visceral, suffocating shock.
And when the second half began, there was no mercy, and there was certainly no relief. Brazil, desperate to save face, completely abandoned whatever tactical discipline they had left, just pushing forward in a blind panic. And Germany, they brutally punished every single mistake. Andre Schürrle scored in the 69th minute, and then he scored again in the 79th. The 7th goal felt so surreal that even the German players held back their celebrations, almost uncomfortable with the sheer scale of the devastation.
Finally, in the 90th minute, Oscar managed to score a goal for Brazil. But the historic 7-1 scoreline was already set in stone. That single goal was entirely insignificant compared to the humiliation. When the final whistle blew, it brought relief to the Brazilian players, sure, but their lifelong nightmare had really only just begun.
Part 6. The Lasting Legacy. Immortalizing the 7-1.
The match was over, but the cultural earthquake had just been triggered. Almost instantly, social media exploded. Memes flooded the internet. But more importantly, the phrase, the 7-1, became a permanent scar in the cultural lexicon. In Brazil today, if you suffer a massive failure at work or a terrible day in your personal life, you might literally say, well, it was a 7-1. It completely transcended sports to become a universal shorthand for an unmitigated disaster. The immediate aftermath for these two nations couldn't have been more stark. For Germany, it was the ultimate vindication of their 14 years systematic rebuild. Just days later, they would defeat Argentina to become world champions. But for Brazil, the tournament that was supposed to erase the ghost of 1950 ended up creating a trauma exponentially worse.
However, history has a funny way of balancing itself out. Over time, the 7-1 stopped being just a humiliation and became a mirror. It forced Brazilian football to confront some really uncomfortable truths. Just like Germany's crisis in the early 2000s, this apocalyptic defeat forced Brazil to strip away their illusions, let go of their reliance on pure emotion, and begin the painful, necessary work of rebuilding their footballing infrastructure for the modern era.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. Will the ghost of the 7-1 ever truly leave Brazilian football? A nation healed from 1950, only to be shattered all over again in 2014. It is a stark reminder that on the world's biggest stages, when passionate dreams collide with cold, strategic perfection, the impossible absolutely can and will happen.